take Mary's advice and either do yogurt or yoga this morning? Yes? As you just heard, I'm Pamela Bren from Tutor.com, and I'm honored to be here. I think this is our 5th or 6th year of sponsorship, and we are so thrilled to once again be supporting the good work of MCEC, and I'm thrilled to see all of you here this morning. I'm up here to make 2 announcements. One is, please remember to do your bingo card. We're giving away an iPad mini tomorrow morning, so go around and see all the good folks out there. And the other thing, and I just dropped it on the floor, as if giving away an iPad mini isn't good enough tomorrow morning, so remember your bingo cards that I think you all got in your registration packets. We're also doing another little giveaway, so there are cards on your table. But again, enjoy your breakfast and enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage MCEC board members Barbara Day and Kathy Calais.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for getting up so early. Anybody out there did yoga?
Oh, we can.
Oh, I see a few.
The lights are brutal. All right, good morning, everyone. Get it together, Barb. I'm on West Coast time. Okay. That's the true confession. All right, so programs such as our National Training Seminar require the support of a host of sponsors and organizations who provide funding, gifts, and countless hours of staff work, and volunteers, all for the sake of the child. Within that network of supporters are a host of individuals who are able to effectively network across various entities such as nonprofits, governmental agencies, and academia. The featured speaker for our first master class is Ashley Merryman, an award-winning journalist and author of 2 New York Times bestsellers, Nurture Shock, New Thinking About Children, heralded as one of the most influential books on child development ever written, and Top Dog, The Science of Winning and Losing, revolutionizing the world of elite performance, with its astonishing exploration of what's really in the heart of a champion. Ashley Merriman's and Poe Bronson's insights changed the world's dialogue on child development, using science to develop a fuller picture of our lives. She has won 9 national awards, including the Penn Center USA Literary Award for Journalism and the American Association for the Advancement of Science Award for Science Journalism. A graduate of Georgetown University Law School and the USC School of Cinematic Arts, Ashley Merryman is an attorney who previously served as a speechwriter as well as in other positions with the Clinton administration. So with that said, let's give a warm MCEC welcome to Ashley Merryman.
Are you going to be up here?
I am. I'm hanging out with you.
All right, cool.
Am I going to be in your way?
Nope. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for making it. I made it too. Whew. In fact, actually, that's kind of relevant. See, I don't know if any of you noticed, but earlier schedules had that I was speaking at the 3 o'clock session this afternoon. But they asked if I would switch with General Miley because he has a scheduling conflict. So, well, of course, that's no problem. Except it actually was a problem. See, I had planned on giving you all a pop quiz on everything you learned during the day. But I'm first up, that's not fair. But happily for you, the general's gonna give the quiz for you. But here's the one thing I need to tell him. How do you want me to score your quiz? Do you want it to start with a 0 and you gain points for every right answer? Or do you want to start with 100% and lose points for every wrong answer? Let's see, show of hands. Who wants to start with a 0 and gain points? Who wants to start with 100 and lose points? Isn't that weird? I mean, think about it. You either know the answer or you don't, right? How does my scoring change the information in your head? Yet you all think you do. You all think that I have the magical ability, because not one of you didn't raise your hands. You knew immediately how you wanted me to score your test. The more you think about it, the weirder it gets, huh? Well, it turns out you're right. How I score your exam actually does affect the information in your head. It does change your score. Knowing I'm going to give you a score changes what you're thinking. It changes what you remember. It changes what you think is important. And we know this because of research out of the University of Texas at Austin, and they did this as an experiment. And fascinatingly, graduate students and undergrads do the best at the beginning of the semester with a 0 and gaining points, and they do the best at the end of the semester with 100% and losing points. What we think was going on is that at the beginning of the semester, the students are thinking, wow, this is going to be incredible. I am going to learn so much. I'm going to be so inspired by my teachers and my classmates. I'm so excited to be here. And at the end of the semester, it's, I have 5 papers, 3 exams, and a presentation to give, and if I don't get 100% on this, I lose my scholarship and have to move home with mom. Just this on the exam! That switch. Is this on the exam? Changed everything. What they were going to pay attention to, what they're going to take notes on, what they thought was important, even though they had no idea that that switch had happened. Like that. That experiment, our experiment right now, is sort of a microcosm of the things I want to talk to you guys about today. I want to talk about the science of motivation. What drives us to learn? What drives us to grow? And then I want to talk about stress and the reality of things that interfere with that drive to grow. And I want to talk about feedback. What are the best things that we can do as educators, as mentors, as teachers, as parents, as friends, to help people do their best? And then finally, I want to talk about military culture and how I think if we do it right, military kids have an advantage over the rest of American society, which I firmly believe they can. So let's start with the science of motivation. What is it? Now I have to tell you, the reason I'm saying this is because it's sort of a confession. I thought I had motivation right. I'd been studying the science for years, I'd written magazine articles, I'd written books about it. I had it down. I knew that there are 2 types of intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation is that love of doing it. You just wake up in the morning and go, yeah, I get to do this today. And extrinsic motivation is everything else. You may love your job, but I'm guessing you don't keep going if they stop paying you. Extrinsic motivation. It could be praise from a coworker, a reward, a compliment, peer pressure, criticism. Anything that comes from outside you, that's extrinsic motivation. And the research shows that extrinsic motivation really has no correlation to academic achievement. Intrinsic motivation does. The love of school fuels doing better in school. And it actually is stronger as kids go along, which is interesting because a lot of behavioral measures drop out. And when you look at classroom subjects specifically, it's stronger still. Middle school math achievement predicts high school math achievement. That's not a surprise, right? If you understand order of operations, it's probably going to help you when you get to more complicated material. But middle school math motivation predicts middle school math achievement. Now that's a little interesting, but again, maybe you like it because you're doing well. It's legitimate. But maybe you're doing well because you like it. But here's the really interesting thing. Middle school math motivation predicts high school math achievement just as effectively as middle school math achievement. That effect persists. That engagement, that I like this, I care about this, persists. Now, that was all of the science of motivation that I knew, and I thought that was all pretty useful and pretty important. And then I had this conversation with University of California at Berkeley neuroscientist Sylvia Bungay. And Sylvia was explaining to me that motivation is expressed in the brain through the transmission of dopamine, a neurotransmitter. And she was talking about how most neurotransmitters sort of go from synapse to synapse. But dopamine works differently. Dopamine is sort of spritzed on these large sections of the brain all at once. And when that happens, the neurons become more plastic. The synapses fire more information more efficiently so that you hold the information. And the brain just becomes sort of hyper-focused and hyper-excited. My mental image of this, an 8-year-old boy with a new video game. Locked in. That's your brain on dopamine. And then I was like, well, wait. Okay, wait, Sylvia. I know about dopamine. I've been reading about dopamine. Dopamine is how the brain expresses reward, specifically in the ventral striatum and the nucleus accumbens. Someone gives you praise, someone gives you a reward or a trophy, and your brain lights up with dopamine. Woohoo! And then I got completely confused. Because my mental image was that motivation was sort of the gas in the car that fueled getting to your goal. The more gas, the better the quality. The more your engine revs up, you get to your goal faster. Made sense to me. But Sylvia was saying motivation gets you dopamine, and rewards and successfully achieving your goal gets you dopamine. Well, that's weird. You get the same thing for achieving your goal as pursuing your goal? That didn't make any sense. And then I thought about those times when I agonized over the perfect birthday present. Oh my gosh, are they going to like it? Oh, I don't know, maybe this is the wrong color. Should I return it? Oh, I think this is perfect. Oh, I need new wrapping paper. Blah, 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 blah. Or the time I was going to have friends over for dinner. Who's coming? What am I going to serve? Should I decorate? What should I do? I get all excited. Everyone's coming. Are you coming? Oh my gosh, you're coming. Okay. And then everybody gets there. My friend opens the present. Everybody's there. And I realize something's missing. All the people showed up. Everybody's eating the food. Something's missing. And I've realized now it's the dopamine. The dopamine I had in the anticipation of my friends coming and having a great time and working for that made the dopamine I got for when my friends showed up pale by comparison. Motivation isn't the engine that gets you to the goal. Motivation is the goal. We as human beings are not designed to check off a bucket list and then sit down on the couch and we're done. You're not done. You've got other things to do today, right? Motivation, we as humans are fueled to learn things and focus and grow and improve and do more. Motivation is the goal. Pretty important, right? So what gets involved? So what is motivation for us individually? What do we do? How do we decide what's important for us? Well, this isn't a pop quiz. I love the fact that you guys were so engaged this morning. Oh my gosh, You don't have to study, right? You realize there's no quiz, right? But there is a survey. A while back, it's a little bit old, but it's the best data we have. Columbia University did a survey, and they asked American parents, do you agree, is it important to praise kids for their intelligence? To say something like, oh, honey, you're so smart. So I was wondering, show of hands, how many of you agree with the 85% of American parents that you should praise kids for intelligence? Raise your hands. How many of you would have raised your hand, but perhaps you read something that me or Carol Dweck or one of my friends wrote? And how many of you would, I'm sorry, I don't know what that means. Give me minutes. Give me minutes. Okay. We've had a little schedule change besides the general. Sorry, guys. So how many of you would have raised your hands, but it must be a trick question or you wouldn't have asked, or I wouldn't have asked? Yeah, I know. In the 1970s, there was a research theory, just a theory, that if we built kids' self-esteem, it would lead to higher achievement. If we said things like, oh, honey, you're so smart, that would actually catalyze sort of a fearlessness, and you could go and work harder. 15,000 studies done on self-esteem to prove that higher self-esteem led to being a better student, being a better roommate, being a better romantic partner. And yes, the data absolutely was clear. People with high self-esteem, fabulous. Tigger is a wonderful thing. Ask him, he will tell you. People with low self-esteem, Eeyore. I suck and everything else does too. But people started realizing scientifically that wasn't terribly good science. You can't ask Tigger if he's a wonderful thing. He says yes. So they started asking roommates and romantic partners and getting GPAs and throwing out the studies that relied entirely on self-report. And of those 15,000, only 200 remained. And it turns out high self-esteem has no relationship to academic achievement, no relationship to being a nice roommate or a nice girlfriend or boyfriend. They just think they're fabulous because they have high self-esteem. And it turns out that achievement leads to higher self-esteem, but high self-esteem doesn't move forward because you don't need to. I'm already great. Why do I need to improve? I'm good. And the research shows that praising kids for intelligence starts teaching them that success is based on this innate skill and they've either got it or they don't. And the research actually finds that these kids who are constantly praised for intelligence, well, it works because it's not sincere, right? You don't really think that kid's a genius. You just tell them that to manipulate them into being fearless. And that works until they experience failure. Because then they realize, oh, you were just saying that because you're my mom or my teacher. Oh. But they become really invested in this identity of being smart. They don't want to lose it. So the research shows that kids who are overpraised and praised for intelligence actually will not fearlessly achieve, but actually underachieve. They would rather do something easy that they know they can do. They would rather cheat. Because, well, I could have done it if I wanted to, but I just didn't care. So the fact that I got a bad grade doesn't reflect on me, it's that guy, because he's the idiot. I just copied. But kids who are praised for effort, kids who are praised for process, for them, we're teaching them that success is based on something they control. It's up to them to decide if they're successful. And that is incredibly empowering and incredibly exciting. And those kids learn, you made a mistake? That's okay, work harder next time. The focus on those kids who are being overpraised for intelligence develop this fixed mindset, and their focus is to prove to you that they earned their reputation. The growth mindset kids who are focused on effort and things that they can do, they're trying to improve. Now, Carol Dweck has done a ton of research, but one of the things I love was she did a neural experiment with 585 Columbia undergrads. And she brought them into the lab and she asked them questions like, do you pick classes based on what grade you're going to get or what you're going to learn? Is it important that your class knows how smart you are? Is it important your class knows what your rank is? And they fell into these two groups. Now, it's important to realize everybody was a Columbia undergrad. They made it. They were in the Ivy League. So it's not that you can't achieve one or the other mindset. You absolutely can. But what happens in that moment of learning? Well, they put EEG readings, set all of them in front of a computer for a 200-question trivia quiz. And at the end, you would put in your answer, and there'd be a red or green light, wrong or right, and then it would show you the correct answer. What they didn't tell the kids is that the computer was rigged, and no one was allowed to get more than 40% correct. If you got one answer correct, then the questions kept getting harder and harder and harder. As you can imagine, Columbia undergrads are fairly secure in their academic ability and do not like the experience 7 out of 10 times. Wrong, 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 wrong. This was not fun, which made it even greater when Carol said, that was great, can you do it again? But this time they saw the same set of questions as they'd seen the first time. Then we looked at the neural data. And it turned out that those kids who were focused on learning, the growth, they didn't actually have that remarkable a brain pattern. They were just sort of engaged through the whole process. But those kids who were focused on performing, the fixed mindset, had this huge spike of electrical activity right in anticipation for that red or green light. And then 7 out of 10 times, red light, and their brain activity fell through the floor. Only one part of their activity actually increased, and that was the amygdala, which we discuss as sort of the fear center of the brain. And Carol said it was almost as if these kids were afraid of seeing the right answer, because that would prove that their answer was wrong. And just in the past few months, Jason Moser did a replication of this study with 6 to 8-year-olds. Already at 6 to 8, the kids were identifiably in a growth or fixed mindset. Now, they weren't doing a trivia question quiz, they had an age-appropriate task, but what'd they find? They found that there wasn't actually any difference between the kids perceiving correct answers. The difference happened for the errors. The kids who were focused on growth mindset and the fixed mindset both kind of went, oh! But the fixed mindset kids dropped. And we're talking about 200 to 500 milliseconds, faster than conscious awareness. But in that 200 milliseconds, the growth mindset kids paid more attention to the correct answer. Their brains were hyper alert. And because of that, they started improving over time. Failure, mistakes. David Conroy, a researcher at the Pennsylvania State University, says that fear of failure actually is a combination of 5 separate failures. Fear of uncertainty, what happens now? Fear of the shame and embarrassment. Fear of letting down people who are important to you. The one I think hurts the most for fixed mindset. Fear of realizing you're not all you were supposed to be. And fear of people leaving once they've realized you're not that great. Whew. I just gave myself nightmares. So how are we going to respond to failure? How are we going to respond, and what institutionally are we doing to increase that. Well, that is obviously going to bring me to stress. Whew. And we talk about stress, I think especially for military kids, and the research is it's easy to sort of default to talk about chronic levels of stress, right? How bad is one parent's deployment versus multiple deployments versus two parents? How bad is moving twice the national average and all of that? And all of those are really important issues, but there's also this thing called acute stress. And acute stress is how you respond to something in the very moment it's happening. If it's longer than 4 weeks, and that could be, right? You could be studying for a big project, your kid could be practicing for a play, but there's kind of a finite point. If it's longer than 4 weeks now, we're back to chronic. But what about those acute moments of stress? Do we care? I actually kind of really do care. For one reason, there's that old saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And I'm like, yeah, but sometimes it kills you. And I couldn't figure out from the resilience literature which one was which. But the acute and chronic researchers have been looking at this, and just this past 2 months, we've made a huge breakthrough, which is they've realized that acute moments of stress, moderate, and with a moment of recovery, that's what builds resilience. That helps you. It's sort of, they actually call it the stress inoculation model. Little bits of stress over time help you know how to respond to big stress over time. Chronic stress is not a resilience builder. Chronic stress eats the soul and the mind, with physiological and psychological consequences. But the research indicates that if we can teach you how to respond to acute stressors, that can perhaps ameliorate response to the chronic stressors. And an acute stress could be saying goodbye to your dad as he ships out, but it could also be, ooh, I've got a quiz tomorrow. Ooh, I'm gonna ask that girl out for a date. I've never done that before. Your body's physiologically responding in all of those contexts in the same way. So how then do we help kids manage stress? Well, let's start by you guys helping me manage my stress. If I had called you last night saying, oh, I'm on Pacific time and I can't sleep because I'm so stressed that I'm gonna sleep through my session and I'm completely freaked out here, what are you gonna do? Help me, help me, help me. What would you guys have said? Calm down. Do I look like I can calm down? Come on, if I could have calmed down, I would have called you. Harvard actually did that as an experiment. Asked people, if your best friend calls you, says, I have a fear of public speaking and I have a speech to give, what advice would you give? 90% of us, calm down. 1% said, wow, if you're that stressed, you should just cancel. Who are these people? But 90% of us would say some version of calm down. And that turns out to be the worst possible advice. I mean, think about this. When you've been upset or angry or nervous or anxious, and someone told you to calm down, did that ever work? Then why do you do it? It doesn't work. In fact, now you have two things to be upset about. I'm upset about the fact that I'm stressed out about my speech, and now I can be upset about the fact that I can't calm down either. The better advice, you're not nervous. You're excited. You've been looking forward to this. You've been planning this for months. You're doing something you love to do, talking to people who inspire you. You've got nothing to be nervous about. You're excited. That reframing of those butterflies in your stomach as a positive has huge consequences. The difference between being angry or anxious and excited is a 2-liter additional blood output, the cardio output, 2 additional liters of blood per minute. Gonna do better You got more blood, oxygenated blood circulating in the brain? Yeah, you are. Jeremy Jameson, a researcher, stressed out college student studying for the GRE. He said, hey, some of them got an essay during a practice exam. If you feel nervous during this exam, don't think it's a sign you're doing badly. Recent research has actually found that arousal facilitates performance. So it may actually be a sign you're doing very well. The students who were read that, he didn't say, by the way, the research he was talking about was the actual study they were in right then. But you know, what you don't know, it doesn't hurt you. But the kids who read that did 50 points higher on the practice math section and 65 points higher on the actual exam. And now Jeremy's been doing this in community colleges with remedial math students who, if they don't pass their class, this is the end of their college career. And explaining, when you get that feeling, you got to interpret it positively. In fact, researchers are actually calling this interpreting it positively the stress mindset, and finding that if you interpret this engagement as a positive, that actually does help predict lower stress responses to both acute and chronic stress. Now, some of you might be going, okay, well, yes, occasionally my kid has to give a project or a presentation, but is this really helping my elementary kids? How is stress really affecting them in class? Well, depending on the data set and experiment, some researchers estimate that stress is about 8% of a kid's performance on a test. Serious number, right? It's the difference between an A and a B, a pass or fail. Except the other researchers who say it's as much as 50%. Half of your kid's performance on a test is not based on their knowledge, but how they felt going into that room. And just saying something like, do your best, actually makes it worse. Because if you think about it, go back to that, am I focused on improving my smarts or improving? Do your best actually is what we call a threat state. A challenge, and it's perfect, the theme is challenges and strengths. The scientific definition of a challenge is that you have the skills, resources, and ability to succeed. A threat, you don't have the skills, resources, and ability to succeed, and the only question is, how badly is this going to go? In a challenge state, you have an increase in heart rate, but your blood vessels expand, so you don't actually have an increase in blood pressure. You get a sustained level of energy that's going to push you through that whole exam. You get more testosterone versus cortisol, more adrenaline versus noradrenaline. And in a threat state, your heart rate goes up, but your blood vessels constrict. It's in a threat state that you hear ba-bum, ba-bum, ba-bum in your ears. It's when your fingers, your feet start getting cold and you can't warm up no matter what. That's a threat state. 2 liters of blood, plus or minus, pumping out of your heart based on threat state. Can you succeed in a threat state? Sure. Is it your best day? No. That's when you succeed in spite of yourself. So you want to be in a challenge state. You want to be excited. You want to be invigorated. Well, how do you do that? How do we get our kids in a challenge state? Well, you can ask. It's a checklist. Do you have the skills, knowledge, resource, and ability to succeed in this task? If the answer is no, okay, what do we do to get you there? Pretty simple, right? Say, well, that works for August, when the kids are going to be preparing for a project a couple weeks or a couple months away. Doesn't really help the kid who's freaking out in the hall because they have a chapter test. Change the goal. Change the goal to something smaller that they can succeed at. Now, it probably should be harder than just write your name. But if you've got a kid who's really shaking, start with just write your name and find one question in the whole test that you know the answer to. That's it, it's one question. And then you can find, solve 5. Okay, you got 5. Now keep going. And it's these smaller increments where kids feel like I've got a chance of success. It doesn't have to be a guarantee, but at least I have a chance. See, it's just not working, given what we're doing or given the kid's mindset. Then here is my default goal. It's an opportunity to grow. It's an opportunity to learn. You didn't know you were having a quiz. It's a total pop thing. You didn't study and you got a 0. Opportunity to grow. What did you learn from this? How are you going to focus? And if we focus on the fact that it's an opportunity to learn, it should always be a challenge, right? We should always be excited about the idea that we're going to get to learn and grow, right? And we've got to focus on this. My favorite example of this is actually an experiment that researchers did with special operators and people prone to panic attacks. And the people who were prone to panic attacks and the operators were preternaturally sensitive to heart rate changes. My heart rate's going up, and they can tell you beat by beat how much. But the operators would think to themselves, is there something in the environment that's changing this? Is this appropriate, given what I'm about to do? And the panickers would say, oh, my heart rate's going up, I'm gonna have a panic attack. And then they did. The operators are using this increase in physiological response as a diagnostic tool. The panickers are using it as the diagnosis. So we can use these tools, do I have the skills, resources, and ability to succeed, as the diagnosis. We can use that butterfly in the stomach. Ooh, get a little stressed. No, wait, I'm excited. All right, well, that's good you're excited. Is there any reason you're not excited? I didn't prepare for this quiz. But learning from the operators gets me to my last point that I promised about that military culture. It could be honor, respect, commitment, integrity, selfless service, whatever core values of whatever military branch you want, they're all fine. I think at a certain point, there's a unifying theme of personal accountability. Belief that I need to do something and I need to improve for myself and for others. If we can teach that to our kids, they are at a huge advantage. Because 64% of American high school seniors think they're above average intelligence. In the 1960s, only 13% of high school students went to college with an A average. 2 years ago, it was closer to 40%. We are constantly giving kids this false praise, telling them how great they are, telling them how special and how wonderful they are, and then they actually encounter difficulty and they don't know what to do. Everybody gets a trophy, which I hate. The literal opposite of everybody gets a trophy is the military culture of medals, which is they are not won, they are not given, they are earned. We need to teach our kids to earn their achievements. And the way to do that is the science of humility. The science of humility is not about being low self-esteem. It's not about abasement. The scientific definition is an accurate view of your strengths and weaknesses in the context of the whole. And if you know what your strengths are, then you get to say, how can I contribute? And if you know what your weaknesses are, you don't have to feel defensive because you've got strengths. You just say, hey, how can I get better? Oh, you're really good at this. Can you help me? And I'll help you on this. But there's that incitement and engagement, and humility, it turns out, is a social bond. People who are more humble are more generous, more improving, and, by the way, better CEOs and military leaders. If we teach kids honest feedback, if we teach them how to understand their abilities through challenge and threat and the true motivation of doing things that they love and because they believe in it, that matters. A study of 6th graders who wanted to grow up to be famous focused on preventing mistakes. 6th graders who said, I want to grow up and contribute to society, focused on learning. So if we teach kids this accurate view of their strengths and weaknesses in the context of the whole, the research says that actually triggers psychological capital. Psychological capital is hope, efficacy, resilience, and optimism. HERO, the hero within. I think we could do no better for our service members than tell them when their families are deployed, we're teaching their children about the hero within. Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage MCEC President and CEO, Dr. Mary Keller.
Thank you, Ashley. Right here. Could y'all clap again while we're standing?